A piece of rocket got lodged into his lung and as a result spent several nights in the hospital. Sadly, this isn't the first time this has happened to one of Osama's sons. His son, Ahmed, also at the age of 7, was actually killed by one of these rockets. This is normal to the family. This this is normal to the family. This is normal to families in this area to see it just as the war and the effects of war. After the death of his son, he lost his job, went into international assistance. He got help from his family, especially from his brother, and his daughter suffers from fits of anger. Apparently, this death took a lot out of Osama. His children were able to cope after the ceasefire was announced, and to cope with death, Osama had another son that was named after his deceased son, Ahmed. So that's what I wrote. I don't know if anyone wrote anything else that I didn't add or if I missed.
Does anyone else have anything to add? Go ahead and unmute with your microphone.
No, that sounds good to me.
So that's pretty much the summary, if no one else has anything else to add. I think just basically all the same stuff. Okay, so let's go on to the next question. List the principles, any principles or concepts from the course that can be applied in offering help or direction for this family. So I'll just start out with stress, obviously. That's a big one. Just noticing the long-term effects that it will have on all of the family members. Often this is a very stressful relationship, and it will have a lot lasting effects. What else do you guys want to add?
I think anxiety as well, having to spend every day feeling anxious about whether, you know, a rocket's going to hit your house or kill one of your children.
Coping. We're like using all the words that's like in the class, but coping because like the family had to cope with the death of the brother. They had to cope with the father who had kidney stones and lost his job. They had to cope with the daughter who has anger fits, and even the dad's brother and his son who had been killed as well. I'm sure it's like a whole family coping process, and they ended up having a new baby, which I'm sure probably helped because they said that they like to keep the memory alive, and they even named their new son after the one that had passed away.
Okay.
For me, I thought that one of the things that should be focused on is communication between the family. I'm sure that in a very extreme situation like this, there leaves very little time for effective communication. And I know we didn't get to hear much about the marital relationship. So I think the marital relationship is very important to how the family copes and how the children feed off of what they're experiencing.
Okay. Anyone else?
I want to add something. One of the things that I have written down here is, I don't know if anyone saw it this way too, but I think one of the important principles that was applied was resilience, in the fact that the children were living in this war zone area, and it was very, I think they learned how to, or like they got used to it and got accustomed to it, that it was just like they just kind of like learned to move on, and part of being a resilient person is learning how to cope and move on with things, and I think that in some way they learn how to do that at a young age.
Yeah.
Good. Anyone else?
And I think it's really important. Sorry, just
No,
based
you're
on
okay.
resilience, is that under these circumstances, it's so important for them to become not just adjusted to the situation, but adapted to the circumstances in which they live. Um, it doesn't seem like, this is something that happens quite often, and the thought of having to become adjusted um, is really frightening, but it's also important.
Yes, I agree. Okay, go ahead, Meredith. Did you have something?
Just to add on to what Evelyn said with resilience, I think that really shows, especially at the end where it talked about how the younger son was really fearful, but then he was still able to cope with this. And then the day the ceasefire happened, he just went on with the rest of his life. He's like, all right, well, it's over. He was really resilient and was able to he didn't let it affect his personal well-being, and a sense of he didn't let it psychologically affect him, which shows resilience.
Yeah, definitely. Any other thoughts about support or grief or thought processes, moods, anything?
I just thought going off of just kind of what we were talking about, I feel like some of the family dealt more effectively with the loss and their situation than others. I know it mentioned that the son kind of, it happened and he just kind of like let it brush off and just knew it was normal, but then it sounds like their daughter actually was struggling, having anger issues and stuff. So I think that it kind of handled it each, differently, and some handle it a little bit better than others. So
Coping?
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, anything else?
I don't know if this was mentioned yet or not, but I thought that assimilation was also part of it, because of the fact that he did lose his son about 4 years ago, Ahmed, and then he did have the other son, which they named Ahmed also. And so he realized that his son is gone, and I think something that stood out to me a lot was when he talked about his son and said that he could have a child every single day, but it still wouldn't replace his eldest son. And so I think that was something very important that stood out to me, because he did name his other son Ahmed, but it still doesn't replace the son that he lost.
Right. I also think grief is a big part of all that too. Like, how well are they handling the grief process? Are they actually dealing with it? Are they shoving it under the carpet? Is it something that, obviously they're very resilient in their behavior, but how are they actually dealing with that grief process? Are they allowing that process to take place?
Honestly, I don't feel like the dad handled it that well, because you hear how he lost his job because of this, because of his grief, and I can't remember what else it talks about. He lost his job, and he went on international assistance for the rest of the time, and
He had 2 kidney replacements too.
yeah,
Or
2 kidney
drops.
replacements.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just doesn't sound like he handled the loss of his son very well. And it says, and it's because sons are so important in their culture, but still.
Yeah. All right. Does anyone else have anything else to add before we move on to the next question? To cover some of the different things that we would choose. I'll be more specific. Principles or concepts from the course that can be applied in offering support here. Anything else that anyone can think of? Okay. Let's move on to the next question then. List the relevant risks, dangers the family and its members face. Okay, so what do you guys think are the relevant risks, dangers that the family and the members face, that the family members face? I thought, just one before, you guys are all thinking, is I thought one of the dangers is just the child that's even growing up, that's named after the boy that died, is Ahmed. that just having that name could be an issue at some point. I know my husband's grandfather ran over his sister, and her name was Susie, and then he named his daughter Susie, and I think that was kind of weird for her. So anyway, just something to think about there. Any other thoughts or risks?
I think just oh, I think just the mental stability. Obviously the daughter gave into it, but I feel like that's the son who was able to be resilient was really at risk for, how do I put this? Since he didn't react to it after it happened, that that the effects might happen later to him because he didn't cope properly. Does that make sense?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's one of my fears, that he won't, because he didn't cope normally or properly, these things will come back and psychologically hurt him.
Okay, good. Anyone else?
I definitely agree with you. The fact that Osama's daughter has already been or was having to go through psychiatric care because of how she coped, and then you have the son Abdul, who has some pent-up aggression and violent tendencies, are all indicators of not having coped with what happened to their brother very well. And then one of the other risks or dangers that I thought of was because of the fact that Osama is already depending on international assistance. What happens when that's no longer available? What happens when um, the very little resources that they have turn into no resources? Where does that leave them, and where does that leave their ability to cope with the extreme circumstances that they're already facing?
Very good point.
I agree with you, Leslie, about the whole violent thing. I was gonna say, like, the sister is dealing with it in a violent way, and then Abdul, it says that he wants to buy a gun and he wants to kill the Israelis, he says, and he's holding it against them because that's how his brother died. And I think that he could carry that, like, grudge, I guess, with him the rest of his life and just be hateful towards other Israelis. And I think that that's definitely a risk because, I mean, if he has a future family, that could lead to continued violence and hate.
Yeah.
I thought too, just it talked about, the father kind of having flashbacks going back to the day that his son died. And I just thought too, like, that's post-traumatic stress disorder, and I think any of the members of the family have the potential to develop something like that is a real, condition that really affects the mental stability. And so I think each of them are at risk for that.
Agreed. Anyone else have any other thoughts on that? Relevant risks?
I just thought that another risk, along with what everyone was saying, was just, I think, in having an issue with identity for Ahmed. Like you said, how your family member, naming Susie after Susie. I feel that at one point or another, he might have a little bit of a struggle having an identity of, like, do I need to live up to how my older brother was, or do I have to be my own person? Like, and I feel that sometimes that could cause, some trouble if this child doesn't grow up to have a strong personality or learn how to be a person of his own. And so I think that was very, very important.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how they had the picture of Ahmed in a graduation picture, even though he had been 7 years old. And so I kind of that kind of set the family up as being a possible risk or danger of the future too, to live in that environment of, sometimes people in grieving situations will kind of make these people almost idealistic, and that's kind of hard to live up to. So I thought you brought up a good point, Evelyn. Any other thoughts?
Just going off of what you said about the picture, I thought it was very strange that they had that picture with him, like with the cap and gown, to remind them that he never graduated. Like, I just feel like that's kind of like an unhealthy way of coping with the loss of a child. Like, when you're coping effectively, you remember all the wonderful things about them, but you don't focus on what could have been, or, oh, they'll never get to do this. And so I felt like that was kind of really weird and not healthy at all.
That's a good point. I think that's a very valid point, because if you think about that too, part of healing and moving forward and coping is being able to move forward and look at your moods are positive and moving forward in that direction, rather than just focusing on, like you said, the negatives that didn't happen. So that's a good point. Anyone else have any other thoughts before we move on in this? Okay. Okay, so list relevant opportunities presented to this family as a result of this crisis. What do you guys think? I think some of the opportunities that they had to that are presented to them was the ability to work together as a family, to work through relationship issues. I can't remember if it was this class or another class. I get them all confused in my head, but it seems like just the fact that you can have conflict. Actually, it's in my theories class. That you can have conflict and that it actually can be a huge benefit to you in some ways, to help you to grow closer together. You might lack in other areas, but you can grow closer together in others. So that was one opportunity I thought that they had, was to work together and bond their relationships together if they work together. Anyone else? Have any thoughts on relevant opportunities presented to the family?
I think a good opportunity that was, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. A good opportunity that they had was the fact that they had so many extended family members that were going through the same thing. Like, that was a really, really, really good resource that they had, really good opportunity they had, so they could be able to cope efficiently, knowing that they weren't the only ones going through this trial.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say, so you said it. But I think another thing that I had written down here was just an opportunity to show others that it's possible to cope with this, I guess, this hardship. Like, this little boy, Mahmoud, or I think that's his name, in the beginning, like, they talked about how he would only say 2 words at a time, and he got hurt and had like a punctured lung and a fractured rib, and yet he was still able to continue smiling and go and play outside with his siblings. And I think that in a weird way, it's kind of a comfort for other people, like neighbors, how the father Osama was talking about the same thing, like, we are all going through it, like our neighbors go through it too. And so I think that that was an opportunity that the child had to show them that it's okay to move on, even though it is super hard and their circumstances are not even compared to the tea with us or the things that we're going through.
True.
I also thought with oh, I forgot the son's name, the one that was hurt from the shrapnel. I thought with his injury and the fact that he survived would hopefully bring an opportunity for the family to be very grateful that they didn't have to go through the experience of losing another son, and that that would hopefully turn into an opportunity just to build better relationship, build a better relationship with each of the children. Not just, I mean, based on the fact that, you know, they may not be here tomorrow for one, but two, with what happened to the other son, it just gives you that realization like time is short. You know, tomorrow's not promised. Enjoy the time that you have. Show them that you appreciate them, and just try to build some kind of healthy relationship with the children.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I thought that just a few things kind of talked about the ability for them to strengthen the relationships. Just wanted to focus on communication. It didn't talk a lot about the husband-wife relationship, but I do feel like communication was it's such an important part of getting through any trial. So they really have an opportunity here to talk about what they're feeling, what they're going through, their challenges, and opening up with each other, which helps you when trying to deal with hard situations. And sometimes that's easier for some and harder for others. But I think kind of learning how to open up about this kind of a situation and talking about it amongst their family members, especially for husband and wife. And then I also thought too, I think when you lose a child, and you know, we all have the church as a common denominator, so I feel like we kind of all, I always think, you know, oh, it's not the end, you know, we'll be together forever, so we have that to fall back on, but not everyone has that. But I do think that in any opportunity, regardless of what religion you are, what you do or don't believe, when you lose a child, you really have an opportunity to kind of figure out what it is you do believe. And so I think they kind of, having lost this son and brother together, they had this opportunity to kind of reevaluate what it is that they really believe. Do they believe that their son and their brother is in a better place? Are they going to see them again? And so I think just trying to find some spiritual like common ground and kind of figuring out what it is they believe spiritually.
Going along with what Justin said, I wrote down here about how you know, their son died at age 7, and then they had another son get injured in the same manner at age 7. It's kind of almost ironic how that happened, and the family had an opportunity to look at that as a merciful experience where, okay, we have a second chance and our son didn't die. And I feel like by that happening, with the situation being so similar, they should have viewed it as an opportunity to grow because they had that mercy of the son living. So that was my thought.
Good thoughts. Anyone else have any other? Okay. Just to kind of go along with that, I mean, it kind of reminds me of Abraham. I know this is a spiritual note, but you know how he was almost sacrificed on the altar when he was a young boy, and then later on in his life, his only son, and yet that was such a trial for him and such a moment of growth for him too, to find out who he really was. So I think that's also an opportunity for this family to really realize who they are, and like you all kind of mentioned this, especially Justin, where it's, you know, an opportunity to really find out what you believe. So, okay, so moving on, let's go to the next question. Note important relationship considerations. What do you guys think? I thought what was really interesting was, just like Justin's been saying, that there was no real mention of the mother and how she felt about the child dying and how well she was even coping or handling it. I thought that was an interesting relationship. And I also thought the relationship between the brothers was interesting too, because he owned his own business as a construction worker, and his brother had lost his job, and I just wondered about that relationship, how that was going as well. Any other thoughts?
Going along with that, I'm pretty sure that it said that the brother of the dad didn't lose his son, but the dad, Osama, I think his name, did lose his son, and it was around the same time period. And I think that Osama could have been like, "Why me? Like, why did mine have to die?" I mean, I know that they're family, and that's really bad to say, but people could say that. I mean, I have heard of circumstances where it was like, "Why was it your child and not mine?" And I think that's important because it could create a barrier between the two brothers, and I think that's like an important relationship consideration to make.
I
Very
think
true.
I think another really important one is the parents and the daughter. Because obviously the daughter's struggling a lot. And it says in there how the boys are more important than the daughters. So even to begin with, the daughter feels of lesser importance to the father, especially. And so I just feel like she will not develop properly at all unless the parents, at least the mom, hopefully the dad, steps up and starts being there more for her.
Just to piggyback on that, um, the relationship between Osama, his wife, and his daughter, and even the sons and their sister, or the sons and their mother, I think is really important because of what was just shared, that women don't have as much value as the men in that society. And so there's, because we weren't told very much about the relationship between Osama and his wife, are their feelings taken into consideration? Does anyone really care how they're coping? Is it just really, is it a male-dominated society? So I think the relationships, just in general, between the men or the females and the males are really important, um, in the respect of how each position or each role is viewed in their culture. Um, and then another relationship consideration that I had was just the relationship with their higher power. Um, I don't want to make any assumptions, but whatever their beliefs are, whatever their views are, just kind of going on what Justin had said. They're, in times like this, like, we're lucky we have a different perspective, we have a different belief, and we know that when times get rough, that we turn to our Savior. And although they may not have um, that religious equivalent that we do, but I'm sure that every culture has some sort of spiritual belief that they can um, draw strength from, draw comfort from. And so just kind of, whether it's establishing or maintaining that relationship is going to be very important in terms of how you cope and how you view um, life in general.
I thought one last thing too, and we kind of talked about it already, but the second son that was named after his brother that died, I feel like, being named after him, and I feel like kind of always how the family is kind of not handling, his death, or at least moving on from it, or handling it in the best way. They're still like having, problems remembering it, and it's creating some problems with the family. So I think that too, as a child, growing up in a family like that, where they've lost this older sibling, but he never met the older sibling, so he doesn't really have a connection. But I feel like he might get lost in in the family, and kind of everyone's always referring to this other brother who he has no idea who he is, yet he has his name. And so as they're, you know, interacting with him, it's reminding them of this other brother who's now dead. So I don't know, I felt like, especially for that youngest son who doesn't really know anything about the other brother, it would be challenging for him interacting with the rest of his family, just because naming him that in general is bringing back these hard memories that they're having to relive over and over and over again.
Anyone else have anything else to add about the relationships that may be of concern that we haven't looked at yet?
Just another parent-child relationship that I'm interested in more specifically is the relationship between the parents and Abdul, the son with who wants the gun, and how they are. I think it's funny that, well, not funny, but the girl they had taken to receive psychiatric care, and I just wonder what makes Abdul's situation different, where they haven't resorted to psychiatric care for the son. And so, and it goes back to how they view females and males in their culture, but that's an important relationship to consider in terms of how they're going to help him cope. So yeah, that was the other one.
That is such a really good point you bring up, because just the way that the son was coping and the daughter was coping, they are kind of similar, but yet they're viewed very differently. So that is a good point. Anything else before we move on to the next question about relationships?
I think just really quick, along with what both of you were saying about the similarities between the siblings, if the different treatment because of the gender could cause a rift or a sibling rivalry, and so I think that's something to look out for too.
Good point. Okay, anything else? How are you doing, Justin? Are you doing good on the notes? Are you keeping up okay?
Yeah, I'm doing my best. Sorry, that's probably why I'm not contributing it super much. I'm just trying to write everything down. But yeah, I'm good.
You're contributing a lot just by doing that, so I just want to make sure. Okay, next. Recommendations to supporting involved parties. So what would you guys, oh no, first of all, recommended coping strategies. I'm sorry, I skipped over that one. Recommended coping strategies. What would you guys recommend for their coping? I'm going to start by saying I think it's interesting because it seems like that, you know, they were living in the stairwell, sleeping in the stairwell at night. It's obviously been a very hard environment that they're living in, and so I would definitely recommend group support or bereavement of some kind, and I don't know that they have that in Gaza. So I don't know how their government feels about that, or if there's anything like that going on, but that'd be a huge recommendation for me.
I think going along with what you said, you know, you kind of mentioned pretty much group support or maybe doing a non-obviously LDS version of family counseling. So the family can sit down and talk about, okay, so like the son is feeling this way and the daughter's feeling this way, and you know, oh, we understand how you're feeling, and just kind of normalizing how they're feeling. And also, I was thinking that the daughter would really benefit from writing mood logs since she suffers from anger issues. That would really, and not only that, but kind of help her calm down in a sense of things she probably has anxieties about and things that she's thinking in her head that actually aren't as bad as they seem, or make them seem that bad so she can cope with them that way. Or yeah, I think she would really benefit from this.
it's kind of related to mood logs. I just thought that the whole family can really benefit from some CBT, some cognitive behavioral therapy, because just from reading the case study and reading what Osama said, he just sounds angry to me. And I think that they can really benefit from a little bit of positive thinking, a little bit of just trying to be optimistic. And I do believe that as parents, no matter how horrible a situation is, we can really do a lot in sheltering our children from the negative effects of what's going on around us just by thinking positively. And so um, I just think that if they try to just change their thought patterns, try their hardest to be a lot more positive, and that's going to come by way of probably other things like Meredith said. Mood logs will contribute to that. Having a relationship with their higher power will help contribute to positive thinking, but I definitely think that positive thinking would go a long way in this family.
I think that simulated family therapy sessions would also help. I'm not really sure if they have those set up over there because of like the dangerous circumstances, but I'm sure that I know that some churches do mission trips and help build houses and things like that, and it really gives people someone to talk to. And I think that if they all sat down together and talked with someone, that could really help get their feelings out as well.
Just going along with that, I felt that it was important, since there are smaller children involved, that I think that they can benefit from the most basic model that we've learned, which is the ABCX model. I believe it's pretty simple, and it's something that can be taught to the children in order to help them understand what they're going through and kind of figure out and understand their own feelings. I think that was something that was important to look at. And another thing that I also have down is just being mindful. I guess knowing that you're living in this place where there's a lot of rocket explosions and you don't really know if you're going to survive the night or not. I think it's really important to cherish every moment that you have with the family. And so I think that that's something important that every member of the family can benefit from. So those are my thoughts.
I agree, Evelyn, with what you were saying, and I just wanted to add too about being mindful. I think too, like, I've never lived in a situation like that, but I'm sure that you're constantly fearful of something happening, and so it would make it really hard to live, in the present and enjoy and be grateful for each moment that you have alive. But I also think too, like the family focuses a lot on the past, and so that helps again in being mindful. They're either fearful of the future or stressed and grieving because of this traumatic thing, all these things that have happened in their past. And so I think the mindful it's really important for this family, especially because they have things to be scared of in the future, but then all these things have happened in the past. So if they could focus more on just the now, it would be helpful.
Just to go back to resources, I think that an honest evaluation of what resources they have available to them is going to be huge. Seeing that tragedy just happens to sit on their doorstep, it's really important to assess what resources you have available, because the availability or the lack of resources is really influential on how you cope, and how you adjust and how you adapt. If you have no resources, coping is going to be so much harder. And that's where, maybe Osama comes in and says, hey, you know what, maybe relying on international assistance is not really what's best for my family, because if they take it away, our family is going to be in a worse situation, because we have no resources. Or just coming up with strategies for acquiring more resources that will help their family deal more effectively with with a crisis that just seems to be prevalent in their life.
I think one last one really quick is meditation techniques. If I were in that kind of situation, I think, some simple yoga every day, even teaching the kids that orange technique where you take the orange and you think about the orange and where it came from, and you peel the orange. I feel like that would really help not only the kids who suffer from anger issues, but also the parents as well. So.
Well, and I would like to add, too, just some way that they could get hope going again in their life. Obviously, the dad is not coping well because he's not been able to keep a job. His health is bad. He's relying on assistance in other places, and so I think some of that coping, like looking at those resources that they have available, just to establish some sort of hope in future employment, or some kind of things like that, just to give them a hope, because it seems like they live in a pretty war-torn area. So I think it's important to focus on creating hope, helping them find hope in their trial. Any other thoughts?
If I could just add, in terms of family typology, I think that the component of that model where about family types, I think that those 4 areas can really help a family determine where they can make adjustments here and there so that they can become more effective or can cope better. They can pick up techniques and work on becoming more resilient, more regenerative. So it's a really good indicator of where you are on that continuum as far as that characteristic is concerned. And then you can just kind of develop ways on how you can just become stronger, how you can become higher placed on that particular area. So I think assessing and finding out how you can improve your family type could be big.
Awesome, good point. Anything else on recommending coping strategies before we move on? We have 2 additional questions. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Recommendations to supporting involved parties. What would you guys recommend in supporting these involved parties?
I would probably just say continuing, like getting involved with your community, because obviously they're going through the same things and they could really benefit from being able to hear other people's stories. So just getting involved in their community and becoming more diverse in that way.
I would say maybe keeping a journal. I know, like, it could be hard, but I think writing helps me whenever I'm stressed and upset. So I think keeping a journal, and if something were to happen to one of the family members, they could always go back and read their journal entries and, like, pass it down from family to family.
I think that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that all of them can benefit from some therapy, from some psychiatric care, in just to help in helping them deal with not just daily life, but some of the big crises that they've experienced that they obviously haven't gotten over yet. So I think that they can all benefit from some sort of therapy.
Okay. I think one important recommendation would be to just have one of the involved parties be there for the younger children. As I think we've all came to the conclusion that the father's not very stable and he hasn't been able to cope well. And so I think from what we've learned in the class, we need to have like a positive role model. And so I think that maybe just having another adult figure be there for the children would be something that would help them a lot.
Any other thoughts for the involved parties, ways that they could be helped, or anyone else could help them or support them?
I think that one important recommendation, and this is based on the reading material from this week, is that Osama and his wife try to develop more egalitarian um, perspectives or roles. In the reading, it says that those couples that were less affected by the exposure to the missile launches and all that um, had a more egalitarian relationship. And so, and I think that's really important in terms of how you deal with day-to-day crisis like this, is that there has to be some flexibility within the family, that when dad's down, mom's got to be able to pick it up. Um, and that, and that's going to require, especially in countries such as this, that the roles become a little bit loose or a little bit more flexible, and that there is an equality between male and female, between husband and wife, in order to help them um, pretty much get through this.
Good points. I thought that reading was really interesting too, to read about and see how different couples handled things. Last question. About additional resources you may provide or suggest. What are some additional resources that we haven't touched on that you may provide or suggest? I think just the spirituality aspect, getting in touch with that side of their life would be a really huge one. If there is some part of the community that isn't as affected by the war, if somehow they could assist the war-torn areas better, I don't know. It just seems like everyone's so affected from what the father was saying. So, just looking at all those resources around, I guess, other countries and how they could assist. It seems like America's helping a little bit, but how else could there be resources to help and relieve the stress? Those are my thoughts. Anyone else?
One thing that I thought of, kind of going off of that, is, I mean, I don't know what we've said. We don't know what kind of resources they have available to them in that kind of a country, but I feel like it would be really beneficial to provide just education about living in situations like they do. Like, they have to accept the fact that they live in this kind of a situation and it's probably not going to change. So they have to be able to live in it and handle it and deal with that. But I think, like, having education and like kind of what we're reading this week and all of the material that we're learning on how to develop resilience, what are some things, so just kind of increasing their education on what works for families that are living in these types of situations would be beneficial. So whether that would come from like the government providing it, or like us as an outside country, America, sending in like educators that kind of do seminars, or I don't know what, but something like that to give them a little bit more information on how to best live in these kind of conditions.
This is probably totally unrealistic, but when I thought of this question, I was like, dude, we need to airdrop some Book of Mormons. You know, just experiencing life as we know it. You open the Book of Mormon and there's a story there for everyone. There's something in there that speaks to everyone and helps you cope with the smallest of things and with the biggest of things. And so I totally would. I would, like, if I had the opportunity, I just airdrop a million Book of Mormons with a stamp on the top or a sticker that says please read. I just think of how much the Book of Mormon has changed my life and the lives of everyone I know, and I just think that the stories in them are great and that they could bring so much hope to anyone, despite nationality, creed, social circumstances, anything.
Okay, any other thoughts before we are done here? About resources, any ways that people could be helped or that we haven't thought of? Sure makes you want to start nonprofit organizations for people like this, huh? So, all right. Well, everyone, thank you for coming to the group tonight, and thank you for your input and your support. And I think this is the most fun in our class because it really helps me to ground some of the principles that I learn. I read so much stuff, but sometimes I forget so much stuff too. So having you guys come and do that with me helps me a lot to remember. So thank you for showing up. Do you guys have anything else you want to add before we're done?
Really quick, Justin, I don't know if you want to put that into a Google Doc for us all to review, or if you're okay, or if you want any help on finishing writing any of these concepts.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and like I've kind of just written down bullet points. I don't know, when you guys have done your other ones, did you leave it at bullet points, like where you expounded on them, or did you kind of make it more into like paragraph form?
I made it into paragraph form when I did it, but honestly, I'm sure bullet points would be fine too. Whatever you feel like is the most effective way to.
Okay, well I'll just kind of deal with it and I'll put it on a Google Doc and then send it to you guys sometime tomorrow so that you guys can all look through it and edit it if you need.
Okay.
I did mine in bullet points last time and got an A, so I'm sure bullet points are fine.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank
So
you.
whatever
Thank you for
works
that.
for you. Thanks for doing that, Justin. And do you want to, will you submit that then for us all after we've looked it over?
Yeah, after you guys all look through it, review it, and add anything that you want to, once we get it finalized, then we can go ahead and I can submit it, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate it. I hope you're having a great summer.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah,
We'll
thank you.
talk.
All right,
Okay.
bye.
Bye. Good.
Bye.
Bye.